You know why we love our parents? It's because we've felt firsthand the love and kindness they've shown us. We grew up with their love and care, and we know deep down the goodness they've given us. And if we don't give back, can we really feel at peace? That's where the hearts of filial piety came from. It's not just some intellectual idea we understand, it's about the real experiences we've had with our parents' goodness. Because we've experienced it, we feel the urge to repay them. And if we don't, our hearts won't settle. It's not about thinking, it's about feeling. Restlessness isn't just in our heads, it's a feeling in our hearts. And you know what that feeling is called? It's our conscience telling us what's right. Let's say you're running your own business, and you make a decision that ends up having a big impact on one of your employees' lives. From a logical perspective, the choice you made might make perfect sense, following all the modern business rules and norms. You finish up for the day, head home, sit down to have dinner, and out of nowhere, thoughts about that decision start making you feel uneasy. So, you go over the situation in your head, realizing that you didn't do anything wrong and that it was the logical thing to do. You try to focus on eating. But as you take another bite, those thoughts come crashing back. That feeling in your heart is telling you something's not right. I'm just giving you an example here. When it comes to dealing with people, there are all sorts of relationships and interactions. In some of those interactions, you handle things in a way that's rational and follows the rules. This isn't just some ancient philosophy, it's a concept from the Western world. They call it the rule of reason, and it totally makes sense. Yet, you can't shake off that uneasiness. That's why I always tell entrepreneurs that learning about management science is crucial. Sure, modern business systems are based on those principles, but that's not the whole story. When you're dealing with everyone in your company, there's a deeper principle to keep in mind. It's something that Western management science can't fully explain. So, they ask me, what's that principle? And I say, it's the heart. Then they go, what do you mean by the heart? And I reply, it's not something you can just put into words. You have to feel it from within. When you really listen to your gut, you'll get it. It's not about overthinking, it's about trusting your instincts. And if you're not sure right away, that's okay. Eventually, it'll make itself clear. Then they ask, what does it feel like? And I say, it's like your good conscience calling out to you. Conscience, like Wang Yangming said, is when you start understanding the universal truth of things. It's that inner voice that guides you and helps you see the bigger picture. Conscience is the key to truly grasping the universal truth. It holds the real power, and no amount of logical reasoning can overshadow it. So how does our heart come about? It comes from living in this world, from the bonds we form with other people. No one exists in isolation here. As long as we're alive, we're bound to be in relationships with others. The first relationship we have is with our parents. It's within that relationship that our hearts start to develop. Then, we branch out to relationships with siblings, and eventually, we enter the marital bond as a spouse and have friendships outside of our immediate circle. The 5 relationships are the foundation. What are they exactly? They are the relationships between rulers and subjects, parents and children, partners in marriage, siblings, and friends. These relationships shape who we are and how we navigate through life. You might think that we don't have rulers and subjects anymore since we got rid of the whole emperor thing. But guess what? The ruler-subject vibe is still alive and kicking. Folks, who's the ruler now? It's our Chinese nation. Each one of us is part of the Chinese nation, making us all subjects in this relationship that will never fade. No matter where you go, you'll always know you're Chinese. Forget about being a global citizen, that's not a thing. This is what we call the modern ruler-subject relationship. The post-80s and post-90s folks who study abroad love their country even more than the post-90s and post-80s folks back in mainland China. The deep love for their homeland develops as they connect with more overseas Chinese. That's how our hearts are shaped. There are 5 fundamental relationships: the relationship between parent and child, between siblings, between husband and wife, between friends, and between country and subject. Removing these 5 relationships, we might say that there is still the individual. In Chinese thought, this is unfathomable. In the Chinese cultural mindset, you are either a citizen, a father or a son, a husband or a wife, a brother or a sister, or a friend. Beyond these 5 relationships, you might want to talk about being an individual. But what does this mean? It is inconceivable in the spirit of Chinese culture. However, in Western cultures, it is understandable. You know Maslow's psychology, right? It's that pyramid thing with human needs. At the base, we got life, safety, health, and getting respect and love from others. And what's next? It's about realizing our own self-worth. But what does it even mean to realize self-worth? It's something mind-boggling for Chinese people. Whether we succeed or fail in life, where does the value of those successes or failures really show up? It's in our relationships with our loved ones and our country. When you achieve success in life, you might feel a sense of self-worth, but it's not the same for Chinese folks. They want their parents to know, to bring them comfort. They want their spouse and kids to know, to let them in on the fact that this is the realization of their life's value, and it needs to be brought to life. This culture is really interesting. You know, those folks from the post-80s generation, they grew up thinking they were citizens of the world, but eventually, they realized they're still Chinese. And guess what? I found out my son is still Chinese too. How did I figure that out? Well, last year, I leveled up and became a grandpa. He had his own little girl. Now I have a granddaughter. The moment my son held his daughter, he told me later, something deep in my heart just clicked, and I know what my future holds. He instantly understood the profound bond between a father and daughter, and man, it was an eye-opener. He knew the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, and he stopped talking about just fulfilling himself. Experiences like these make our nation truly extraordinary. The next generation is the backbone of our Chinese nation, and true Chinese people are all in for their sake. I have a house cleaner at home, he's in his 50s. So, I asked him, "How long have you been hustling in Shanghai?" And he goes, "Over 10 years, about 19 years. Then I'm like, "You must have made some serious cash, right? Can you even afford to build a house back in your hometown?" He's like, "Yeah, I can swing it." I go on, "Then why the heck are you still here? You should retire and enjoy the good life." But he tells me, "Nah, I got 2 sons. My first son got hitched and had a kid, and my second son is in college. I still gotta support him. I'm thinking about my grandkid and my second son. I'm working for at least 5 families every day." Man, I seriously get how amazing this nation is. You know, when we talk about fighting for the next generation, it's all about fighting for what lies ahead. Our nation is all about fighting for the future, and that future lies with the next generation. We don't mind enduring all sorts of hardships in our own lives, as long as the lives of the next generation surpass ours. It's like, that's the ultimate goal, you know? I'm willing to go through all the tough times to create a bright and happy path for the next generation. Can you think of any other nation in the world that does this? Nope, it's just us, the Chinese nation, right? That's why I really can't stand those scholars who keep preaching about Western individualism principles to me. Like, don't even bother talking about individualism with me, it doesn't mean much. Sure, you can talk about it with Western folks, but it's just not suitable for China. Our nation's way of surviving, our values, and the principles we live by, they're deeply rooted in Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, not in Western religion and philosophy. You know what Wang Yongming said? He said that your heart is where your conscience sits, and your conscience isn't something you figure out with pure reason. It's all about understanding the real deal when it comes to human relationships. See, when we talk about having a heart full of respect for our parents, that's when we truly get what filial piety is all about. And guess what? That heart of filial piety comes from how we connect with them. We feel the love and kindness our parents have given us, and we want to give back. That's what we mean by having a heart full of filial piety. Without that heart, you can't really understand the whole concept. You know, there's no one word in English that perfectly captures the essence of Zio. Even if you're really good at English, go ahead and give it a try, but you won't find an exact translation. You might think of respect, which is about how younger generations show respect to their elders. Well, Xiao does include that aspect, but it's so much more than just respect. You could say it's about respect and love, the love that younger generations have for their elders. But what kind of love is it, you ask? It's not like romantic love or friendship love. It's something that's hard to put into words. All Chinese people understand what Xiao means. And you know when we truly get it? It's when we want to take care of our parents, but they're no longer with us. That's one of the biggest pains in life, my friend. Once you go through that pain, there's no going back. And once you experience it, you really understand what Xiao is all about. It's not just some abstract concept, you see. Xiao is not just a concept, it's the real, heartfelt emotion that we carry in our lives. When we grasp that truth, we're in the realm of filial piety, and that's when we truly understand the principle of Xiao. So now, I reckon you have a clear understanding of what heart is the truth means in Wang Yongming's philosophy. So earlier, I talked about the first principle, which is that truths are in our hearts. And now, we're moving on to the second one, which is about listening to your inner conscience. If we had to sum up Wang Yongming's school of heart in just a few words, it would be all about listening to your inner conscience. Now, here's a question for all of you. Can you give it a shot? What does the word cultivate refer to in Confucius' Great Learning? In the Great Learning, it talks about exploring and gaining knowledge, right? But what does Wang Yongming say about it? He says it's about listening to your inner conscience. So, what's the deal with cultivation? Does it mean there's some grand universal truth out there, and you have to search for it until you find it? Like, imagine there's this ultimate truth sitting on top of a mountain, and you climb and climb until you finally reach it. But hold on, it's not quite like that. Let's say you do find it, but then you just stand there, completely amazed that you've finally discovered the truth. No, Wang's cultivation isn't about getting or acquiring something. Why is that? Well, the thing is, we already have it within us. So why would we need to acquire it, right? Cultivation can't be seen as obtaining, right? Maybe it's about establishing it? Creating that inner conscience, perhaps? But no, that's not quite it either. It's not about getting it or establishing it. Remember when I had asked earlier if your inner conscience has a voice? Well, it does. And this metaphor is pretty important. It's a big realization I've had about Wang Yongming's philosophy. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it when I share it with you. So, in my understanding, cultivation in Wang's thinking simply means listening. It is basically all about listening, and the key point is to truly listen. But what we're afraid of is that you might not hear it. Sometimes, distractions can get in the way, and you might miss out on hearing that inner voice. There are different things that can mess with our ability to hear our conscience. One of them is our selfish desires. They mess with our ability to listen. And what's the other one? Oh yeah, logic. Our logical thinking can be strong, and it can also mess with our ability to hear our conscience. But here's the thing, conscience goes beyond logic. You gotta put aside your logical thinking, let go of the control of selfish desires, and only then maybe you can hear it. You gotta really make an effort to listen attentively. So let's ask ourselves, how do we really listen? I just mentioned two things. First, we gotta get rid of the things that block us, like our selfish desires, you know? We need to kick those obstacles out of the way, let's call it clearing the path. And then there's another thing, we need to stop letting logic get in the way. You know, when we overthink things and let rationality take over, we need to ditch that. So, we made two negative statements, right? No more selfish desires getting in the way, and no more logic clouding us. But now, let's talk about the positive side. How do we actually listen? We listen by putting what we know into action. It's all about living it out in our daily lives. Without taking action, we can never truly listen. If we just make our younger generation sit in classrooms and lecture them about being a good person, will that actually solve anything? Hell no. So, how do we help the next generation hear their conscience? By encouraging them to practice what they believe in. And now, here's the third idea, you ready? We all know one important idea from Wang Yongming, right? We talked about heart is the truth earlier, remember? And then we talked about listening to your inner conscience. Well, the third idea is about bringing knowledge and action together, making them one and the same.